The morning sun rose over the colony of New Haven on Kepler 442d, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. Children laughed as they ran through the streets toward the school building. It was a regular day, or so everyone thought. Captain Jiho Park stood at the security station, reviewing the morning reports. Everything seemed peaceful. The human colony had been on this world for 3 years now, and life had settled into a comfortable routine. Families had built homes. Farmers grew crops in the rich soil. Children attended school and played in the parks. It was exactly what humanity had hoped for when they reached for the stars. Teacher Hyunwoo Kim welcomed his students into the classroom. 28 children between the ages of 6 and 10 filled the room with energy and excitement. Today they would learn about Earth's oceans, something most of these colony-born children had never seen. Hyunwoo smiled as little Nari raised her hand with a question before the lesson even started. She always did that. In the medical center, Dr. Myung Choi checked on a boy with a scraped knee. Nothing serious? Just another day in paradise. She sent him back to class with a bandage and a smile. Her schedule was light today. Maybe she could have lunch with her husband. Everything changed at 10:30 in the morning. The Vralthic ships appeared without warning. They were raiders from the Vralthic Empire, a species known across the galaxy for their aggression and cruelty. 3 warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel above the colony's agricultural zones. They immediately opened fire on the farming equipment and storage facilities. Captain Jiho's security team responded within minutes. Human defense fighters launched from the garrison hangar. The colony's defensive weapons came online. Jiho knew his force was small, but they had trained for this. They had protocols. They would protect their home. The Vralthic raiders had not expected such a quick response. Their intelligence had suggested the human colony was lightly defended. They were wrong. Human fighters engaged them with precision and determination. 2 Vralthic ships took damage. Their commander, War Commander Thexrol, ordered a retreat, but Thexrol was not just retreating. He was angry. These humans had dared to fight back. They had damaged his ships. They would pay for their resistance. As his ships pulled back toward space, he made a decision that would change everything. The Vralthic warship turned its weapons toward the colony's main settlement, specifically toward the school building. It was clearly marked with bright colors and peaceful symbols. There was no military value in the target whatsoever. Thexrol did not care. He wanted to hurt these humans. He wanted them to understand the cost of defiance. The weapons fired. Hyunwoo Kim saw the flash through the window. He had 1 second to react. He threw himself over the children nearest to him, covering Nari and the twins Dabin and Taijin with his body. The explosion tore through the school building like it was made of paper. The blast killed 23 children instantly. 31 more were injured, some critically. Hyunwoo felt the heat and pressure wash over him. His ears rang. He could not hear anything. When he opened his eyes, everything was dust and smoke and blood. Captain Jiho heard the explosion from the security station. His blood went cold. He knew immediately what had happened. He looked at the tactical display and saw the Vralthic ships jumping to faster-than-light speed, escaping into the void. They were gone. They had done their damage and fled like cowards. Jiho ran toward the school. He was not alone. Every adult in the colony was running there. Parents screamed their children's names. Emergency responders grabbed medical kits and rushed forward. The scene that greeted them would haunt them forever. The school building was partially collapsed. Smoke poured from the wreckage. Small bodies lay in the rubble. Some children were crying. Some were silent. Some were calling for their mothers and fathers. The sound of children in pain is something that cuts straight through the human soul. Dr. Myung arrived within minutes. She was a professional. She had trained for mass casualty events, but this was different. These were children. These were her neighbors' kids. These were babies. Her hands shook as she triaged the wounded. She forced herself to focus. Save who you can save. Do the work. Fall apart later. Hyunwoo pulled himself from the rubble. He was bleeding from a dozen places, but he did not notice. He dug through the debris with his bare hands, pulling out children one by one. Some were alive, some were not. He kept digging. He could not stop. His mind could not process what had happened. The twins Dabin and Taijin were alive, though Taijin had a broken arm. Little Nari was unconscious but breathing. Hyunwoo carried them out one by one, his teacher's instinct overriding everything else. Protect the children. Save the children. That was all that mattered. Parents found their children or they did not. The colony's small cemetery would need to expand. 23 new graves would be dug into the soil of this world that was supposed to be a paradise. Captain Jiho sent an emergency transmission to Earth and to the nearest human fleet. The message was simple and devastating. Colony attacked. School targeted. 23 children dead. 31 injured. Vralthic Empire responsible. Request immediate assistance. The transmission would take hours to reach Earth, days to reach the nearest fleet, but it was sent with maximum priority. Every human ship and station within range would receive it. They would know. They would all know what had been done. In space, War Commander Thexrol sat in his command chair and reviewed the damage to his ships. Minimal. The raid had been mostly successful. They had destroyed some human supplies and sent a message. The attacking of the school had been strategic. It would make the humans afraid. Fear was a useful tool for controlling lesser species. His communications officer reported that the Galactic Council's automated monitoring system had detected the distress call from the human colony. They were requesting a statement. Thexrol dictated his response with board efficiency. The Vralthic Empire acknowledges minor collateral damage during a lawful raid on human colonial holdings. Such incidents are acceptable costs of territorial operations. The Empire expresses no regret. Weakness invites exploitation. The humans should have surrendered immediately. He closed the channel and thought nothing more of it. He had destroyed weaker species settlements before. This was no different. Humans were just another young race trying to expand beyond their capabilities. They would learn their place in the galactic order or they would suffer, but Thexrol had made a mistake. A fatal, catastrophic mistake. He had hurt human children, and he did not understand what that meant. He did not know human history. He did not know what humans were capable of when their young were threatened. He would learn the galaxy, would learn on Kepler 442d. As the sun set on the worst day in the colony's history, Dr. Myung finally stopped working. She had saved everyone she could save. Some children would recover. Some would carry scars forever. 23 would never grow up. She walked outside the medical center and finally let herself cry. Around her, the entire colony was crying. They cried for the children they had lost. They cried for the innocence that had been shattered. They cried because their safe haven had become a place of horror. But beneath the tears, something else was growing. Something ancient and primal. Something that had driven humanity through countless wars and conflicts across their violent history. Rage. Not the hot rage that burns out quickly. The cold rage that calculates and plans and never forgets. The rage of a parent whose child has been harmed. The rage that would move mountains and topple empires. The Vralthics had awakened something they did not understand. They had crossed a line that should never be crossed. They had hurt human children. And now they would learn what comes next. The news traveled fast. Within 6 hours, every human world knew what had happened at New Haven. Within 12 hours, the entire galactic community had heard the story. A human colony school had been deliberately targeted. Children had been killed. The Vralthic Empire had done it. Ambassador Sojin Lee sat in her office at the Galactic Council headquarters on Unity Station. She had been in a routine meeting when the message arrived. She remembered reading the casualty list. She remembered seeing the names. 23 names. 23 children who would never go home. She had excused herself from the meeting. She had gone to her private office. And then she had screamed. Just once. Just to let out the horror and grief that threatened to overwhelm her. Then she wiped her tears, straightened her uniform, and got to work. Sujin was a diplomat. She believed in peaceful solutions. She had spent 15 years building relationships with other species. She had negotiated treaties and trade agreements. She had avoided conflicts through careful words and mutual understanding. But this was different. This was not a border dispute or a trade disagreement. This was murder. This was the murder of children. She requested an emergency session of the Galactic Council. Her request was granted. Within 24 hours of the attack, representatives from 47 species gathered in the Great Chamber. Sujin stood before them and told them what had happened. She showed them pictures of the school before the attack. Happy children playing. Teachers smiling. A peaceful place of learning. Then she showed them pictures of the school after. The destroyed building. The smoke. The blood. She did not hide anything. She wanted them to see the truth. She played audio recordings of the children who survived. Their voices describing what happened. The fear in their words. The confusion. Little Nari asking why the aliens hurt them. What had they done wrong? The chamber was silent as the children spoke. Then Sujin presented the evidence. Satellite footage of the Vralthic ships deliberately turning their weapons toward the school. Communications intercepts showing the attack was ordered by War Commander Thexrel himself. Medical reports detailing each child's injuries. Death certificates with causes of death written in cold medical language. The Galactic Council members listened. Some looked disturbed. Some looked sad. Some looked away. But Sujin noticed something else. Many of them looked nervous. The Vralthic Empire was powerful. They had a large military. They controlled significant territory. Confronting them meant risk. The Vralthic representative, Diplomat Kreshinok, stood to respond. He was a tall creature with gray-scaled skin and cold eyes. He spoke in the formal language of galactic diplomacy. His words were carefully chosen. The Vralthic Empire acknowledges that civilian casualties occurred during a military operation. We offer our sympathies to the affected families. As a gesture of goodwill, the Empire will provide a payment of 50,000 credits to be distributed among the victims. Sujin could not believe what she was hearing. 50,000 credits. That was nothing. That was an insult. Each child's life valued at barely 2,000 credits. Less than the cost of a small cargo shuttle. She stood again. Her voice was steady, but everyone in the chamber could hear the anger beneath it. The human delegation rejects this offer. We do not seek payment. We seek justice. War Commander Thexrel deliberately ordered the attack on a school. That is a war crime under galactic law. We demand he and his officers be extradited to face trial. Kreshinok's expression did not change. The Empire does not extradite its military officers to foreign courts. The matter is closed. Sujin looked around the chamber. She saw the other representatives shifting in their seats. They were uncomfortable, but no one spoke up. No one wanted to challenge the Vralthic Empire. Fear kept them silent. She had expected this. She had hoped for more, but she had expected this. The Galactic Council was good at talking. They were good at passing resolutions and making statements. But when real power was involved, they hesitated. Very well. Humanity would not hesitate. Sujin transmitted her final statement. It was broadcast not just to the Council, but to every communication channel in the galaxy. She wanted everyone to hear this. The Vralthic Empire has 7 days to meet the following conditions. 1. Extradite War Commander Thexrel and all officers involved in the attack for trial. 2. Pay full reparations to every victim's family, as determined by human courts. 3. Issue a formal public apology acknowledging this was a war crime. If these conditions are not met, humanity will consider itself in a state of war with the Vralthic Empire. The chamber erupted. Several representatives tried to speak at once. This was not how things were done. You did not declare ultimatums. You negotiated. You compromised. You talked until you found a solution everyone could accept, but Sujin was done talking. She left the chamber. She had said what needed to be said. Now it was up to the Vralthics to decide what happened next. Across human space, the reaction was immediate and unified. Every human world, every station, every ship received the news and responded with the same emotion. Rage. Memorial vigils were held. Millions of people gathered to remember the children. They said the names out loud. Gabon, Taijin, Nari, all 23 names. People who had never been to New Haven, who had never met these children, mourned them as if they were their own family. Parents held their children closer. They looked at their sons and daughters and imagined them in that school. They imagined the terror. They imagined the pain. And they decided that this could not stand. This would not be tolerated. Not now. Not ever. The journalist Jiwan Han had been covering galactic affairs for 10 years. She had reported on trade disputes and political scandals. She had interviewed ambassadors and ship captains. But nothing had prepared her for this story. She went to New Haven. She spoke with the survivors. She interviewed Dr. Myong, who described trying to save children who were too badly hurt. She spoke with teacher Hyunwoo, who still had nightmares about the explosion. She met with the parents who had lost their children. Then she created a documentary. It was 3 hours long and completely devastating. She showed everything. The destroyed school, the small graves in the cemetery, the children who survived, some missing limbs, all missing friends, the parents who would never recover from their loss. She ended the documentary with a simple message. This happened. The Vralthic Empire did this, and they feel no remorse. The documentary was watched by over 3 billion humans in the first day. It spread to other species as well. Some alien viewers were moved to tears. Some were horrified. Some began to understand that something significant was about to happen. Admiral Min Ho Kang received the alert while his fleet was on patrol near the border territories. He watched the casualty reports come in. He read Ambassador Sujin's ultimatum. He looked at the faces of the dead children. And then he began issuing orders. His third expeditionary force began moving toward human core worlds. He sent messages to other fleet commanders. They needed to gather. They needed to prepare. The 7-day deadline was not a bluff. Humanity meant every word. On the 4th day, several alien species began quietly evacuating their citizens from Vralthic territory. These were older species. They had been in the galaxy for thousands of years. They had studied the younger races, including humans. They had read human history books. They had seen the wars humans fought among themselves. They knew what was coming. They had seen this pattern before in other species. A peaceful people pushed too far. A protective instinct triggered. A line crossed that could not be uncrossed. They did not want their people caught in the middle of what happened next. The Vralthic leadership received reports of these evacuations. Some analysts suggested taking the human ultimatum seriously. War Commander Thexroll attended one of these briefings. He laughed at the suggestion. The humans have been in space for barely 200 years. They have a small fleet. They focus on defense and exploration. They are soft. They talk about peace and cooperation. They will not attack us. And if they do, we will crush them easily. The Vralthic military reviewed human capabilities. They saw defensive fortifications around human worlds. They saw patrol fleets protecting trade routes. They saw exploration vessels charting new systems. What they did not see was the full extent of human military industry. What they did not understand was human history. Humans had fought each other for thousands of years. They had developed warfare into a science. They had written books on strategy and tactics. They had learned lessons in blood and fire. And when they finally reached the stars, they brought all that knowledge with them. They just had not needed to use it yet. They had hoped they would never need to use it. The Vralthics were about to teach them they were wrong. 7 days after the attack, Ambassador Sojin waited in her office. She had received no response from the Vralthic Empire. No agreement to the terms. No negotiation. Nothing but silence and contempt. At precisely the deadline hour, she sent one final transmission. It was not to the Galactic Council. It was directly to the Vralthic homeworld. The deadline has passed. Your response has been noted. You were warned. You chose this. May history remember that humanity gave you a choice, and you chose war. She then sent an encrypted message to Admiral Minho, one word. Execute. Admiral Minho Kong stood on the bridge of the warship Indomitable and watched his fleet assemble. 47 capital ships, 132 cruisers, over 300 support vessels, fighter wings numbering in the thousands. It was the largest human military force ever gathered in one place. And it was just the beginning. Every human world had responded to the call. Ships that were in maintenance were rushed back into service. Vessels that were patrolling distant borders were recalled. Even civilian cargo haulers were being converted to supply ships. Humanity was mobilizing for total war, and they were doing it with terrifying speed. The galaxy watched in surprise. Most species took months to mobilize for war. They needed to debate. They needed to gather political support. They needed to convince their populations that war was necessary. Humans did none of this. They just acted. There was no debate because everyone agreed. There was no need to gather support because they already had it. From the politicians in Earth's assembly to the miners on frontier asteroids, humanity spoke with one voice. The Vralthics had hurt their children. That was all that needed to be said. General Yunji Nam arrived at the fleet assembly point with her Marine Expeditionary Forces, 20,000 of the best-trained ground combat troops in human space. They had been training for scenarios like this for years. Peacekeeping operations, colony defense, hostile terrain combat. But this was different. This was not defense. This was offense. Yunji walked through the troop decks of the transport ships. She looked at her Marines, young men and women who had volunteered to protect humanity. They looked back at her with hard eyes. They knew why they were here. They knew what they were going to do. One Marine, a young woman named Houn, approached her. General, is it true? Did they really attack a school? Yunji nodded. 23 children dead. 31 injured. Deliberately targeted. Heian's jaw tightened. Then we're going to make them pay for it. It was not a question. It was a statement of fact. Yunji saw the same expression on every face in the unit. This was personal. Every single Marine was thinking about the children they knew. Their younger siblings. Their nieces and nephews. Their own children. And they were imagining what they would do to anyone who hurt them. Dr. Somin Yoon worked in a secured military facility on Mars. She was a strategist specializing in xenopsychology and military planning. Her job was to understand how other species thought and fought. She had studied the Vralthic Empire for years. The Vralthics believed in overwhelming force. They attacked hard and fast. They relied on their reputation to make enemies surrender before fighting even began. Their strategy was based on fear and brutality. It had worked for centuries, but Somin saw the weakness. The Vralthics had never fought an enemy who refused to be afraid. They had never faced an opponent who was willing to accept casualties to achieve victory. They had never encountered an enemy motivated by something stronger than fear. She prepared detailed reports for Admiral Minho and General Yunji, attack patterns, defensive weaknesses, supply line vulnerabilities, command structure analysis. Everything humanity needed to dismantle the Vralthic military machine piece by piece. Engineer Taiyang Xin stood in a weapons development lab on Luna. Around him were prototypes that had been in testing for years. New missile systems, advanced electronic warfare packages, experimental energy weapons, things that were not quite ready for deployment, but deployment timelines had just been moved up. Every weapon system that showed promise was being rushed into production. Safety factors were reduced to acceptable minimums. Testing cycles were compressed. Normally this would take years. They had weeks. Tieng worked 20-hour days. His team worked alongside him. They knew what they were building and why. These weapons would be used against the people who killed children. That made every hour of work meaningful. That made every sacrifice worth it. Among the deployed forces was Commander Kingman Bay. He was a Special Forces operator with 15 years of experience. He had conducted operations on dozens of worlds: hostage rescue, intelligence gathering, asset elimination. He was very good at his job. Kyung Min had a daughter. She was 9 years old, the same age as several of the children killed at New Haven. When he heard about the attack, he looked at his daughter sleeping peacefully in her bed, and something broke inside him. Not broke like shattered. Broke like a dam breaking. All the controlled violence he kept carefully restrained suddenly had a target. He volunteered for the mission before it was even announced. He knew there would be a mission. Someone would have to hunt down War Commander Thexrol. Someone would have to make sure he faced justice. Kyung Min would make sure of it. His team consisted of 12 operators. All volunteers, all parents or older siblings, all carrying the same cold fury. They trained every day, reviewing Vralthic military structures and command protocols. They studied Thexrol's history and habits. They planned for every scenario. They would find him. There was no question about that. The only question was whether he would make it to trial or whether circumstances would require a more immediate resolution. Kyungmin would prefer the trial. He wanted Thexrol to face the families of the children he killed. But he was prepared for any outcome. The 7 days passed with humanity working around the clock. The Vralthic Empire watched the build-up and remained confident. Their intelligence services reported the human mobilization, but their analysts dismissed it as posturing. "The humans are trying to intimidate us," one report stated. "They lack the experience and resolve for a sustained military campaign. Their fleet is impressive in size but untested in real combat. Recommendation: maintain current defensive posture and wait for them to back down." War Commander Thexrol read these reports with satisfaction. He had been right. The humans were all talk. They gathered their ships and made threatening statements, but they would not actually attack. They were too soft, too civilized, too weak. He did not increase the alert status of his forces. He did not recall his fleets from their current deployments. He did not reinforce his border defenses. Why waste resources on a threat that did not exist? Some Vralthic officers disagreed. A few had actually studied human history. They had read about Earth's wars. World War II, the Napoleonic Wars, the Mongol conquests. They saw patterns that worried them. When humans decided to go to war, they did not stop until they won or until nothing remained. These officers submitted reports warning of potential danger. They recommended taking the human threat seriously. Their reports were filed and ignored. The Vralthic leadership did not believe soft, peaceful humanity could be a real threat. They were about to learn they were. Catastrophically wrong. Journalist Ji Won-han continued her coverage. She embedded with the fleet. She interviewed the soldiers and sailors preparing for deployment. She talked to Admiral Minho about strategy. She spoke with Marines loading onto transport ships. She documented everything. One interview stood out. She spoke with a fighter pilot named Yuna Song. Yuna was 26 years old and had never seen real combat. She was nervous but determined. "I keep thinking about those kids," Yuna said. 23 of them. I have a little brother who's 7. I imagine him at school. I imagine him scared and hurt and calling for help that doesn't come. And I think about the people who did that. They think it's acceptable. They think it's just business. I'm going to show them it's not." One asked her if she was afraid. Yuna thought about it for a moment. "Yeah, I'm afraid. But I'm more angry than afraid. And anger is fuel. It'll keep me flying when fear would make me quit." That interview was broadcast across human space. Millions of people watched Yuna speak. They saw themselves in her. Young, scared, but absolutely determined. That was humanity right now. Scared but determined. Grieving but ready. Peaceful by preference but capable of terrible violence when necessary. The final hours before the deadline passed quietly. Admiral Minho reviewed his fleet positions. General Yunji confirmed her Marines were ready for deployment. Commander Kyungmin and his team ran through their mission parameters one last time. Engineer Taeyang shipped the last batch of new weapons to the fleet. Dr. Soman transmitted her final intelligence reports. Ambassador Sujin sent her ultimatum expiration message. Then she waited. She knew what was coming. She had helped plan it. But she still felt a moment of sadness. Sadness that it had come to this. Sadness that the Vralthiks had chosen violence over justice. Then her console beeped. A message from Admiral Minho. First strike launches in 30 seconds. May we find our children's peace in this war. Sujin closed her eyes. When she opened them, she was no longer just a diplomat. She was a representative of a species that had been pushed too far. She was the voice of parents who had lost their children. She was the instrument of justice that would reshape the galaxy. The Vralthic Empire had 7 days to choose peace. They chose to ignore humanity's warning. They chose to believe humans were weak. They chose to think there would be no consequences for killing children. Now they would learn the truth. Now they would face humanity not as the peaceful, friendly species they had dismissed. They would face humanity as their ancestors had known them. As warriors. As protectors. As the most dangerous predators to ever reach the stars. The first Vralthic base commander to die never even saw it coming. Commander Drexener was reviewing supply reports at his desk on the border. Station designated Outpost 17 when his entire facility simply ceased. Human missiles arrived in perfect synchronization. 17 simultaneous impacts. The station vaporized. 300 Vralthic military personnel died in less than 2 seconds. It happened at 17 locations at exactly the same time. Human fleets emerged from faster-than-light travel with perfect precision. No warnings. No demands for surrender. No mercy. They had given the Vralthiks 7 days to choose peace. The Vralthiks chose war. Now war came to them. Admiral Minho watched the tactical display from the bridge of the Indomitable. Green dots represented human forces. Red dots represented Vralthic installations. As he watched, red dots began disappearing. First 1. Then 5. Then all 17 within a 6-hour window. All strike groups report successful elimination of primary targets, his communications officer reported. Minimal resistance encountered. Proceeding to Phase 2. Minho nodded. The Vralthiks had not expected simultaneous attacks across such a wide front. Their response was confused and disorganized. Good. Keep them off balance. Do not give them time to recover. Order all groups to continue with the operational plan. No deviations. No hesitation. The Vralthic military headquarters on their capital world received the first reports with disbelief. 17 outposts destroyed in 6 hours? Impossible. The humans did not have that capability. There must be some mistake. Some technical error in the reports. Then the second wave of attacks began. Human fleets struck at Vralthic supply depots, fuel stations, repair facilities, ammunition stockpiles, everything that kept a military functioning. The attacks were surgical and devastating. The humans knew exactly where to hit and exactly how hard. Dr. Summon's intelligence reports were proving their worth. Every weakness she had identified was being exploited. Every vulnerability was being struck. The Vralthic military machine was being dismantled piece by piece. And they could not seem to stop it. Fighter pilot Yuna Song led her squadron through the debris field of what had been a Vralthic communications relay. Her targeting computer locked onto fleeing enemy fighters. She fired. One Vralthic ship exploded. She adjusted her course and fired again. Another kill. Red Squadron, sound off, she called to her team. Each pilot reported in. All accounted for. No losses. Yuna allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. She thought about the children. 23 of them. She was keeping count of her kills. 1 for each child. It was her way of honoring them. Red Squadron, form up. We have another target. Let's keep moving. Her squadron followed her without hesitation. They had trained together for 3 years. They trusted each other completely, and they were all fighting for the same reason. Justice for the innocent. Punishment for the guilty. General Yunji's Marines landed on the Vralthic military world. Designated as Fortress 3, it was one of their major training facilities. Thousands of Vralthic soldiers were stationed there. It was heavily defended with ground-based weapons and orbital platforms. The humans did not care. They came anyway. The orbital bombardment began at dawn. Human warships positioned themselves above the military installations and fired precisely targeted strikes. Not at civilian areas, not at cities or towns. Only military targets, barracks, training grounds, command centers, weapons depots. Then the drop ships descended through the fire and smoke. Marines in powered armor hit the ground running. They moved with practiced efficiency. Building cleared. Objective secured. Moved to the next target. The Vralthic defenders fought back, but they were not prepared for the intensity of the human assault. The Marines did not stop. They did not slow down. They advanced with mechanical determination. When Vralthics tried to make a stand, human artillery erased their positions. When they tried to retreat, human fighters strafed their escape routes. Marine Hound kicked down a door and swept the room with her weapon. 3 Vralthic soldiers inside. They raised their hands in surrender. She secured them and moved on. Prisoners would be treated according to the laws of war. The humans were not monsters. They were not the Vralthics, but they were absolutely merciless to anyone who chose to keep fighting. This was a message being sent with every battle. Fight and die. Surrender and live. Those were the only 2 options. Commander Kyung-min and his Special Forces team had a different mission. While the main fleet attacked military targets, they hunted specific individuals. War Commander Thexral and his officers. The ones who ordered the attack on the school. The ones who killed the children. Intelligence indicated Thexral had fled to a secure facility on a remote world. He thought he would be safe there. He thought the humans would not find him. He was wrong. Kyung-min's team infiltrated the planet using a stealth insertion. They came down through the atmosphere in a ship designed to be invisible to sensors. They landed 30 kilometers from the target facility. Then they walked. It took 2 days of moving through hostile terrain. They avoided patrols. They bypassed security checkpoints. They got closer with every hour. Kyung-min thought about his daughter the whole time. He thought about the children who died. He thought about their parents. This was for them. On the 3rd day, they reached the facility. It was a fortified compound with heavy security, walls, guard towers, sensor nets. It looked impenetrable. It was not. Kyung-min's team had trained for this. They disabled the sensors first. Then they eliminated the guards quietly. One by one. No alarms raised. No warnings given. By the time the compound realized they were under attack, the humans were already inside. They found Thexral in a command center trying to coordinate with what remained of his forces. He looked up as Kyung-min entered the room. For the first time in his military career, Thexral felt fear. "You cannot be here," he said. "This facility is secure. You could not possibly have gotten past our defenses." Kyung-min did not respond immediately. He looked at this creature who had ordered the deaths of children, who had laughed about it, who had shown no remorse. He felt the weight of his weapon in his hands. It would be so easy. One shot. Justice delivered immediately, but he remembered the plan. The trial? The families who deserved to face this monster. He had made a promise. "War Commander Thexral," Kyung-min said in a flat voice. "You are under arrest for war crimes. You will be transported to human custody to stand trial. You have the right to resist, and if you do, we will kill you. Your choice." Thexral looked at the 12 armed humans surrounding him. He saw the cold determination in their eyes. He saw the weapons pointed at him. He understood that his choices had run out. "I surrender," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "Smart choice," Kyung-min replied. Then he contacted the fleet. Package secured. Requesting extraction. Across the Vralfic Empire, the pattern repeated. Human forces struck military targets with overwhelming precision. Vralfic commanders who tried to fight were defeated. Those who surrendered were taken prisoner. Supply lines were cut. Communications networks were disrupted. The entire military structure began to collapse. The Vralfic homeworld sent increasingly desperate messages to their forces. Stand and fight, regroup, counterattack. But their forces could not regroup because human fleets were everywhere. They could not counterattack because they did not know where the humans would strike next. They could not even communicate effectively because their networks were compromised. This was not a war. It was a systematic dismantling. The humans were not trying to conquer Vralfic territory. They were eliminating the ability to make war. Every military asset, every weapons factory, every training facility, all of it being erased with surgical precision. The Galactic Council watched in shock. Most species had assumed that if fighting began, it would be a long, drawn-out conflict. Months of battles, gradual shifts in territory, diplomatic efforts at ceasefire. That was how wars typically went in the galaxy, but this was not a typical war. This was humanity teaching a lesson. And they were teaching it fast. Ambassador Sujin received messages from other species. They wanted to mediate. They wanted to negotiate a ceasefire. They wanted humanity to show restraint. She responded to all of them with the same message. Humanity will accept nothing less than total surrender of all Vralfic military forces and the handover of all individuals responsible for the attack on New Haven until those conditions are met. Operations will continue. Some ambassadors protested. This was too harsh. This was disproportionate. The humans needed to show mercy. Sujin's response silenced them. 23 children were murdered in their school. Was that proportionate? Were they shown mercy? We gave the Vralfic 7 days to choose peace. They chose this. We are simply giving them what they chose. On the 19th day of the war, the Vralfic High Command sent a message. They requested negotiations. They wanted to discuss terms. They were ready to talk about surrender. Admiral Minho received the message and shared it with his command staff. There were 23 officers present. He asked for their opinions. Should they accept negotiations or continue operations? The vote was unanimous. One officer, Captain Jiho Park from New Haven, spoke for all of them. The courtroom on Earth was silent as War Commander Thexral was led to the defendant's station. He wore simple prison clothing. His scales looked dull under the harsh lights. He no longer looked like the proud military commander who had dismissed human warnings. He looked small and defeated. Judge Wanshik Cho sat at the bench. He was a stern man with gray hair and eyes that had seen too much injustice in his long career. But this case was different. This was not about property or territory. This was about children. 23 children who would never grow up. The trial was broadcast across the entire galaxy. Every species watched. They watched the evidence being presented. Satellite footage showing the Vralfic ships deliberately targeting the school. Communications intercepts with Thexral S. voice ordering the attack. Forensic reports detailing how each child died. Dr. Myung Choi took the stand as a witness. She described the injuries she treated. She talked about trying to save children who were too badly hurt. She explained how some children died in her arms despite everything she could do. Her voice remained steady and professional, but everyone could see the pain in her eyes. Teacher Hyunwoo Kim testified next. He described the moment of the attack. The flash through the window. The explosion. The screams. He talked about pulling children from the rubble. Some alive. Some not. He showed the court his scarred hands, burned from digging through hot debris with his bare hands. Then the children testified. The ones who survived. The twins Dabin and Taijin, now 9 years old, told the court about seeing their friends die. Little Nari, who was 6 when it happened and 7 now, described being scared and hurt, and not understanding why the aliens hurt them. The parents of the dead children gave statements. Each one stood and said their child's name. They showed pictures. Happy children playing, smiling for cameras, living their lives. Then they described what they lost. The futures that would never happen. The grandchildren they would never have. The holes in their hearts that would never heal. Vexrol sat through it all. He was not allowed to interrupt. He was not allowed to leave. He had to hear every word. He had to see every picture. He had to face what he had done. When it was his turn to speak, he offered a prepared statement. His lawyer had written it. It expressed regret for the loss of life. It claimed he had not intended to harm civilians. It asked for understanding of the difficult circumstances of military operations. Judge Wanshik listened to the statement without expression. Then he asked a single question. War Commander Vexrol, did you or did you not order your weapons officer to fire upon a clearly marked school building? Vexrol hesitated. His lawyer whispered to him. Finally, he answered. I gave the order, but it was a military decision made in combat conditions. A military decision, the judge repeated, to fire upon a school, where children were learning, during a retreat from combat, against an enemy who was not firing on you at that moment. That was your military decision. Vexrol said nothing. What could he say? The evidence was overwhelming. The truth was clear. The trial lasted 3 weeks. The verdict took the jury 2 hours. Guilty on all charges. War crimes. Murder of civilians. Deliberate targeting of non-combatants. The list went on. 23 counts of murder. 1 for each child. Judge Wanshik delivered the sentence. Life imprisonment. No possibility of parole. Vexrol would spend the rest of his life in a human prison facility, thinking about what he had done. You had a choice, the judge said. You could have fired on military targets. You could have retreated without attacking civilians. You could have shown even basic respect for the laws of war. You chose to fire on children instead. You chose to laugh about it. You chose to show no remorse. Now you will live with that choice for the rest of your life. Vexrol was led away. His officers faced similar trials. All were convicted. All received harsh sentences. Justice was served, though it could never bring back the children who were lost. Ambassador Sujin sat in her office at the Galactic Council. She had returned after the war ended. She had new responsibilities now. Negotiating the peace terms, ensuring the Vralthic Empire could not threaten anyone again. Building a new order where this kind of tragedy could not happen. The peace treaty was harsh but fair. The Vralthic Empire would pay reparations to every victim's family. Full compensation for medical costs. Educational trusts for the injured children. Death benefits for the families of those killed. The total came to billions of credits. The Empire would also demilitarize their border regions. No military bases within 100 light-years of human space. No warships allowed in neutral zones. Any violation would be considered an act of war, most importantly. The Vralthic Empire formally acknowledged the attack was a war crime. They admitted wrongdoing. They accepted responsibility. They could not deny it. The evidence was too clear. The galaxy had watched the trial. Sojing had one more task. She addressed the Galactic Council in a full session. Representatives from every member species attended. They wanted to hear what humanity would say now that the war was over. She stood before them in her formal ambassador's uniform. She looked around the chamber at all the different alien faces. Some looked nervous. Some looked curious. Some looked respectful. They all listened carefully to what she said. Members of the Galactic Council, humanity comes before you today not as conquerors but as defenders. We did not seek this war. We gave every opportunity for peace. But when peace was rejected and our children were murdered, we did what any species would do. We protected our own and sought justice for the innocent. She paused and let her words sink in. Some have said our response was too harsh, too violent, too unforgiving. To those critics, I ask a simple question. What would you have done? If your children were killed, if the murderers showed no remorse, If they laughed about it and offered insults instead of justice, what would you have done? The chamber was silent. No one had an answer they wanted to say out loud. Humanity cherishes peace. We seek friendship with all species. We believe in cooperation and mutual benefit. Our history shows we are capable of great compassion and generosity. But our history also shows something else. We protect our young, we defend the innocent, and we will never tolerate the murder of children. She looked directly at the representatives of several powerful empires. Let this be a lesson to all species. Humanity will be your friend or your enemy. The choice is yours. If you seek peace, we will welcome you. If you seek cooperation, we will work with you. If you seek to harm innocent beings, especially children, you will face our wrath. This is not a threat. This is a promise. Sojin left the chamber to complete silence. Her message had been delivered. The galaxy would remember. On New Haven, life slowly returned to normal. The destroyed school was rebuilt. It was larger now, more secure, but the memorial garden remained beside it. 23 trees growing tall and strong. Their leaves rustling in the wind, Dr. Myong walked through the garden every morning before work. She touched each tree. She said each child's name. She remembered their faces. She would never forget them. None of the survivors would. Teacher Hyunwoo returned to teaching. He had taken a few months off after the attack. The trauma had been severe. But he came back because the children needed him. The ones who survived needed to see that life went on, that they could still learn and grow and be happy. Nari was in his class again. She was 8 now. She had scars on her arm from the explosion. She still had nightmares sometimes. But she was smiling again. She was asking questions again. She was healing. The twins Dabin and Taijin were doing better too. Taijin's arm had healed completely. They still missed their friends who died. They probably always would, but they were learning to carry that grief while still living their lives. Captain Jiho Park, now Admiral Park after his promotion, commanded the defense fleet in the sector. His ships patrolled constantly. They protected New Haven and dozens of other human colonies. They made sure nothing like the attack could ever happen again. He stood on the bridge of his flagship and looked at the planet below. His home, the place where everything changed, where humanity learned that sometimes peace requires the willingness to fight, where the galaxy learned that humanity was not weak or soft or naive. Admiral, patrol report coming in, his communications officer said. All sectors clear, no threats detected. Across the galaxy, other species adjusted to the new reality. Humanity was no longer seen as a minor power. They were recognized as equals to the oldest and strongest civilizations, not because of the size of their territory or the number of their ships, but because they had proven something fundamental. They could be pushed but not broken. They could be patient but not weak. They could be peaceful but not harmless. And most importantly, they valued their children above everything else. Several species began seeking closer ties with humanity. They wanted trade agreements, defense pacts, cultural exchanges. They recognized that having humanity as a friend was valuable, and having humanity as an enemy was catastrophic. The Vralthic Empire became a cautionary tale. Children across the galaxy were told the story. Do not be like the Vralthics. They hurt human children, and look what happened to them. Parents used it as a lesson about consequences and respect.